Hello, my name is Alex, and this is my health behavior change project. The first step was selecting my behavior, and the behavior that I decided to change was supplementing art into my daily life by implementing a period of drawing into my nightly routine. I selected this behavior because I wanted to find another way to express myself and intentionally connect with the right side of my brain, as I do not have the opportunity to do this as often as I would like to, being a STEM major, which is highly left centric. Second step was to monitor the behavior, and I monitored by keeping track of how often I was doodling or engaging with art each day for a week, as well as my mood before I did so. And that chart is below. Step three was changing the behavior, and to change, I set aside 15 minutes every evening after I would journal to freely draw in my new sketchbook that I bought for this activity. I kept all the supplies next to my journal on my nightstand in order to associate this time and space and all these materials with the habit of drawing every single night. Step four was to track. After additional few weeks, I have tracked the length of this behavior along with how I feel before and now after, in order to graph my continuity of this over time. So this is week 2 and week 3. As you can see, the first couple weeks were rough, but by week 3, I was doing it every day, not for longer usually than 15 minutes, but I was sticking with it. And same with week 4 and week 5. And in the future, I will continue this activity, but without time limits. I also would change how I start a new page every day and instead allow myself to add or continue from previous pages. I have a friend who always says that people make time for what's important to them, and he's absolutely right. I often feel that there's not enough time in the day to do the things that I need to do, let alone everything else that I want to do. And that was a big obstacle during this project because some days it felt like another chore to complete my drawing time, but eventually it was something that I looked forward to. A few other challenges were thinking about money. Sometimes we feel that when you start a hobby, you must buy all new materials, and I definitely felt that way. So I just got a cheap sketchbook. But luckily for this change, I could use anything that I had around, like pencils, pens. I had all the materials pretty much already. There's also the challenge of criticizing your own work, and I just kind of had to get over that with practice over time. Some tips and tricks that I would share with anyone else trying to form a new habit or even just this habit. Association was the biggest key for me in making this behavior a habit. The same place, same time was my motto. Otherwise, it became easier to push it off. This became really hard over break because, like Thanksgiving, because there was nothing on a regular schedule and I was far away from school. But I just had to find a spot and time that worked for me while I was away. I also found it helpful to think about this as an appointment and not an option. I feel this is how we should always view self care and taking time for ourselves, and that in itself can be a huge roadblock in creating healthier habits. But if we make it a mandatory thing for ourselves, it becomes a lot easier to do. The least helpful thing that I experienced was videos online of artists doing this every day because it wasn't possible for me to start at that level with that caliber or the same kind of materials. So it was really discouraging. And I found it easier to relate to people who started from square one, like I was. So I would recommend getting advice and frameworks to do an activity or a hobby from people who started your task at the same level as you. And that may not be square one, but wherever you are at. Throughout this project, I learned that I am motivated by the effects of an action and not the process of doing it. So this was a really good practice of doing something just because I was doing it. So the process itself was rewarding and not having to just have the end justify the means. This was also a really big step in me letting myself be abstract or going into something not knowing what I was going to create because I'm often a words person, which is like very to the point and clear, but I had to find alternative ways to express myself with this activity, not using words. Literature claiming that this was an emotional release didn't help me at first because throughout the first couple sessions, I was so worried about things turning out good that I was really stressed during the activity and not relaxed at all. However, after a while, I looked forward to it and it became easier to do. 3 weeks was about the mark at which it became habitual, and that was to be expected from most of the papers that I read, saying that it would take about 3 weeks to make something a habit. This activity also reminded me of topics from abnormal psychology, where we talked about the unconscious and psychoanalysis a bit. Um, looking back onto some of my drawings, I don't remember exactly what I was feeling when I did them. So it reminds me of like the Rorschach tests, where one's perceptions of these ink plots are analyzed to examine their personality characteristics and emotional functioning. And it's like, it helps me reflect on what I'm feeling right now or what I get out of the photos now. So I thought that that was pretty interesting. Something surprising throughout this project was when looking into the behavior change, uh, the scale at which art therapy can impact the psyche for any number of people is amazing. And studies show that creating art stimulates the release of dopamine. And these increased levels of this feel good neurotransmitter can be very helpful if you're battling with things like anxiety or depression. And sometimes our emotions like sadness or anger can't be expressed with words. They're so complex and they're overwhelming. So when you're unable to express yourself that way, but you need an emotional release, making art can help you do it. So I encourage everyone to try this if you're at all interested, because it was really fun and it really helped me, and I plan on continuing it in the future. And these are just my references. Thank you.